Hi everybody, welcome to week 5. We are talking about my absolute favorite thing, teaching with multimedia. And as you have learned over the past 5 weeks, I believe, and many people agree with me, that being able to be brave enough to record your face and voice is such a strong way to do instructor presence in your course. So I hope that you will embrace the fact that this week you'll have a chance to record your own video, edit it, produce it, get it up on a video host, link it in your Canvas site, in your Sandbox site, and also caption it. So that's what you have in store for you, and that's basically what we're doing for the whole week. We're going to take a look at 2 different types of instructor videos, this overview video type of thing that I've been doing at the beginning of every week, and then separate from that, the recorded lecture. So I give you some resources for thinking about that. So we're going to be learning about screencasting best practices, slide design best practices, that's what I wrote my master's thesis on, and also the course overview video and really examining the structure of these and how you can do these for yourselves. So I look forward to seeing your final product at the end of the week. Let's talk about last week. There's so much great work going on, so much good practical stuff. I hope it's practical for you. I hope you're doing it actually to develop out modules that you will be using in your courses rather than just getting them done so that you could turn them in here. That's been my point, is to not have you waste any of your time just doing hoop jumping activities. But there's a couple of things that I wanted to talk with you about. First of all, a little housekeeping thing. The learning science and designing practices discussion that we did in Google Docs, where you, instead of using the discussion forum in Canvas, we use Google Docs and the Google Doc mention feature in order to be able to have an asynchronous conversation with each other. That conversation is still going on in here, and I'm glad it is. I was getting some notifications over the weekend, and I was like, oh crap, I didn't set up a no submission assignment for this activity. So I wanted to show you what I mean by that. If you are using functionality that is not sort of the big 4 functions of Canvas, the discussion forum, quiz, assignment, and page, and you want to provide points for an assignment, you will need to set up not only the page that explains to students what you're having them do, but also a separate no submission assignment that gives you a column in your gradebook that you can assign points for them. So I wanted to tell you that here, this learning science and designing practices conversation that you were all having, great rich discussion in here, and also that I had just made a mistake in my administration of this course and not done that. I want to show you what I'm talking about. I made the page that gave you the list of all the readings, and I said, okay, to complete this task, go out to this Google Doc. Because I created that in a page, that didn't make a gradebook activity, so I needed to separately go to assignments, and I'm showing you the instructor view obviously, and make a separate entry in the assignments area to hold the grade for this activity. So I called it Discussion Learning Science and Designing Practices. And I'm going to turn on the edit settings for you and show you that I added the grade scale complete incomplete, because that's what we're using for this program, and submission type no submission. So if you had this discussion showing up in your to-do list for this week, it's because I changed something over the weekend, and your participation should have stayed the same. But I did go in and do complete incomplete for those of you that participated in this conversation. Just wanted to explain that and hopefully share it as an example of something that could happen in your course and that you'll have to explain to students. Of course, you will have your act more together than me. I'm just telling you what I did. Anyway, moving on. In one of the discussions, or for last week, week 4, we had a lot of great revelations in the testing your module discussion. Of note, Dan was asking, could we get learning analytics talking about what devices students are using and what types of activities they're using what device for? I reached out to our Canvas team and found out that We can't currently get that granularity of data. That's good to know, but now we have that request in and they know that we are looking for it. But what I wanted to offer is the fact that in the readings for this week, there is a really brief EDUCAUSE study that talked about what devices students have and what they're doing with them. And I supply that for you as a reading in week 5, so you'll encounter that. And what that study found was that 99% of students have a laptop computer, and that was just one study, and our local context would be different, and I agree that it would be nice for us to be able to have data on our local students, but we don't have that and can't get it as of today. But great question, Dan, and I love it when you all sort of wonder aloud what kind of data is available. We are going to be talking about learning analytics also in week 6. You will have a chance to think about what kind of analytics would be useful to you as an instructor, because the thing that will strike you when you have your own fully online classes is that suddenly the face-to-face feedback that you're used to being able to get, we don't have access to that in the same way anymore. So we have to rely on analytics and how students are using the site and what they're clicking on and their interactions in the space. But we'll talk about that next week. I wanted to share a cool thing that Ning did, and Ning, I hope it's okay that I'm showing this, but Ning chose to use Hypothesis to provide some feedback to me about her module. And I wanted to share this idea with you in case others of you would like to use this as a way of explaining your design decision, asking additional questions. I'm always happy to answer pointed questions about the work that you're doing on any of your modules or your assignment sheets, obviously. But Ning actually posted some comments, and I found it really useful to be able to understand where she was in her design process. So maybe that's a useful idea for you. Also, it gave me the idea that Hypothesis might be useful as a collaborative tool for people who are working on the same, for example, web page together. There were a lot of great comments and feedback about the guest ID process, and people had all manner of issues with that, as I had anticipated, because we have that problem every time I ask people to do this. But hopefully you found it to be a valuable exercise, having a test account that you can use to find out what it's like to be a student in your course. And most of you did arrive at the conclusion that this was a useful exercise. One of you in the feedback for the week shared a concern that it's concerning that you had to tie your personal email address to your test account. And I can totally hear that. And here's a solution that might work for you that we in my unit have used. We got a group of 3 guest IDs, and we shared a document where all of us have access to the login information for all those guest IDs. So you wouldn't be tying it to a personal email address, you would be just using a communal test student. What I like personally about having a test student that I can access that's related to my personal email address is that I can go in and also see what notifications students are getting. I was unaware the first time I taught a course in Canvas what students were getting notifications on. And I found it illuminating to be able to log into an email address that I had access to and be able to see those. But I totally get and share your concern about that as a test ID and having it linked up to your personal email account. But hopefully the idea of having a bank of them within your departments would be a viable solution for you. And like I say, my unit does this all the time. Joe had a great question about course admin tools versus the People tab and how I had you add in your guest ID. I had you adding in your guest ID using the plus People button on the People link in your course menu. And Joe, I believe, was trying to do that in his live site. You will notice when you are working in your live site, and by live site I mean the site that's linked up to PeopleSoft, your student enrollments, you won't be able to add people that way. There's transcript-related reasons why they don't want instructors adding people manually to courses, but there is another tool that you will be able to use, and I'm just going to demo that for you. Under Settings and Navigation, if you enable this tool called Course Admin Tools, you will be able to add students in exactly the same way as we practiced this week. So for your live sites, course admin tools is how you add people. And for your development sites, just go ahead and use the people tab like we did this week. So Joe, I'm so glad that you brought that up. Meanwhile, all of you, as you are starting to load your week's worth of activities into a module, are grappling with all kinds of very practical user experience-based concerns that everybody who starts to design their Canvas site eventually has to make decisions on and come up with their solutions for. I want to point out sort of two separate philosophies for how people are lining up their modules, and I don't think one or the other is more correct, but I do think being consistent is going to be key for your students and for you in terms of your own record keeping and how you do your workflow for your grading and course maintenance from semester to semester. And what I mean by this is how granular you get in terms of lining up the activities within your modules. The way I've been doing it and the way I've been modeling it for the past few weeks is putting a group of content resources and readings into the activity where you'll be using the content. So for example, last week with our major assignment, I said, read about transparency in assignment design, and here in the assignment itself, go ahead and respond. That's one way of doing things. Sort of the other major philosophy would be to line up each of the individual resources in a granular way. So instead of having 5 or 6 things for you to read in that major assignment workshop page, each of those readings would be a line item in the module. I think that whatever way you do it, the most important thing is going to be making sure students understand what you're doing, being consistent from module to module, and making sure that if you are a person who is adding all of your resources into the modules, that you are doing that every single week and not mixing and matching with both of those techniques. And also not providing too many redundant hyperlinks. I will share that the way I used to do my overview pages back when Canvas was brand new and we were first learning how to use this, I had my activities to complete this week and all my hyperlinks to each of the activities on my overview page, and then students would encounter the hyperlinks there and then encounter each of the individual links when they press the next button, so they got everything 2 times. I got a lot of feedback that was confusing and difficult, and people were just having to manage a bunch of open tabs, and they were frustrated and people's blood pressures got out of control. So that's not to say that you shouldn't do it that way. That's just to say the feedback that I got, the way I did it. The other thing that I noticed, and I believe I was talking about this, we noticed that when you line up an individual reading in the module, the only type of requirement that you can add, and by requirements I mean where you go through and say that complete is view, mark as done, or submit assignment. When you add a URL direct to a reading on the module view, the only requirement you can choose is view as done, which in my opinion sort of sucks, because you can imagine that if a student was using the module view as a to-do list, they would want to be able to say, okay, I downloaded that resource, but go back and manually mark it as done after they actually had read it. So I thought that was a little disappointing, but be that as it may. These are all things for you to be thinking about and just continue to make your decisions. And I'm glad we're all grappling with them together and that we have the Slack discussion to talk with each other and so you can talk through some of these things. One of you said that it was sort of confusing to you that your test student had a funky name to it. I wanted to point out to you that any of us can change the display name for any of our accounts at any time by going to Account and to Profile and to Edit Profile. And if I was logged in as my test student, I could actually write Ann Fandry test student here in this blank. I'm not going to do it because this is my real identity, but I just want you to know that if you are confused by having one sort of nonsensical name for your student profile or you have 2 of your own name, you can change them here. This week, we're going to be doing a peer review on the major assignment that you submitted last week. 10 of you still have not submitted that assignment. I'm going to assign the peer reviews on Wednesday of this week, and I won't be able to do that until you have submitted your major assignment draft. So please, for those 10 of you who haven't done that yet, definitely get that submitted in the week 4 space. And in week 5, we'll do the peer review, because I really want people to see what that peer review tool looks like, and so you can help guide your students through it, because consistently people have trouble with that peer review functionality. It's nice when it works, but students always need help, especially in a fully online course. I wanted to point out to you, because some of you have been grappling with this with your major assignment, I put a resource on how to set up multi-part assignments in Canvas. It's a Google Doc that's linked in the major assignment workshop. And the reason it might be useful to you is because you will notice that Canvas doesn't have a mechanism for linking assignments together, which is problematic for people who are being really thoughtful and scaffolding their assignments and having people submit a draft and then a final copy and the peer review step in between. So what it necessitates us doing is making an overview page and then helping students see which of the assignments are linked together as part of one big assignment. So if you are a person who has that scenario coming up, please do take a look at this multi-part assignment in Canvas resource, and let's continue to workshop that, because it's too bad that assignments in Canvas can only have one due date and one submission. So we have to do these workarounds. This morning I've been looking in on your rubrics, and I wanted to showcase Meredith's rubric. Not all of you can see this because this is a group assignment, but I hope you can take a look at what's happening on my screen here. She has written a series analysis final essay, and she has spent a bunch of time writing out the positive example of the criteria and what each individual criterion, what the positive example looks like. And then she has a scale. 25 to 23 points is excellent, 23 to 20 points is accomplished or good, 20 to 18 points for this criterion is developing and fair, 18 to 15 points is beginning or attempted, and 15 to 0 points she has as needs substantial work. So the bulk of her authoring of this rubric has been in defining what the positive example is and not belaboring what the specific difference is between 23 and 25 points, but just assigning a category of excellence to that. So a couple things I really appreciate about this rubric are that it gives students some parameters, like what is the difference between if I got 25 points versus if I got 15 points. And it is fairly scannable. Like you have to read the criteria pretty closely on the far left column, but then the rest of it is a scale that she'll just be able to click as the instructor, make her grading go quicker, and also make it easy for students to kind of quickly at a glance understand where she evaluated them. And the other thing I appreciate about this is this language. If we recall back to reading about growth mindset, so often I read rubric exemplars, and they are filled with sort of punitive language or stilted or stodgy language. But what I appreciate about Meredith's is she's using words like developing or beginning and attempted, and that really harkens to that growth mindset idea. So if students get 18 or 15 points here, they see that they have this language of I have attempted this assignment rather than I am a bad person. I hope that makes sense. So it really feels more like it's supporting the student's motivation and affect in terms of the evaluation, and not having it be harsh and punitive, but having it be supportive, growth-oriented. So I wanted to point that out, and I hope that Meredith will let me share this with all of you. Another thing I see in people's rubrics besides unintentionally harsh language or unmotivating language is that they have either all points or no points and no sort of range in between, so students can kind of understand what the difference is between a lot of points and getting middle amount of points or 0 points. So I think it can be helpful to have a range of ratings, not necessarily having all 5 like Meredith has here, but 2 or 3, not just all or nothing. One thing a bunch of you did, which I really appreciated, was that you talked to your students in your rubrics rather than talking about them. I thought that made the language feel very approachable and made the rubric feel like a supportive tool, which is what it's meant to be. Not only a way to make our grading easier, but also to help the students understand how to be successful in the assignment. So I really appreciated how a lot of you were talking to students and showing how they could be successful in the assignment. So strong work, everybody. From the weekly feedback, thanks to everybody who continued to be so frank, so thoughtful in your feedback. 2 of you from last week, the feedback that I received from week 4, said that you are interested in understanding more about how you can make your grading workflows more efficient. We'll be talking about that next week, so look forward to that. And one of you noted that you appreciated the hands-on nature of last week when we were actually making stuff in our sandbox sites, but that you would wish that we had been able to do that earlier, maybe as early as weeks 1 and 2. Thank you for that. I continue to learn from you, and we'll definitely put that into consideration for the next time we do this, if we do this program again, so thanks for that. 2 of you noted that you are realizing, holy buckets, this is going to be a lot of work to get your Canvas site ready for teaching. And as far as I'm concerned, if that's the main message, my work here is done. There is so much that goes into making a usable course website. That's why many institutions have instructional designers doing this for the instructors. I don't know how that will look for CLA in the future, but for right now, you're doing it. And I want you to know that we all know, we in Lattice know that you are doing a lot of work and that it is a lot of work. It's front-loaded work. So you'll find if you do all this stuff before the semester starts, it will be a different amount of work than you're used to if you are used to preparing live lectures for on-ground classes. So I hope that's a bit of a consolation, but I hear you. It's a lot of work. It's a learning curve, and you're deep in it, and you all sound like you have such great attitudes about it. I'm learning so much from you. I'm appreciating what I'm learning so much. This has been a long overview video. I hope it's been worth your time. I will see you online. Thanks for everything. Talk to you soon.